violence, damage to public property. There's that group. What do you do about them? I guess that would be my question.
Well, in that case, if we're going to be judging the protesters and the protests by the most violent members,
no. I'm not judging.
I understand. I understand where you're coming from.
I'm asking, what do you do about them? Them. Don't talk about the protesters. I'm not about them.
So if we're going to discuss that, we must also discuss how we're going to deal with the most violent members of police forces.
No, it's separate issue.
It's a double negative.
What are we doing about the protest? No. Let me tell you what about the violent people in the police force. They should be shot and buried. That's what they should be done. They should be arrested and put in prison for breaking the law. They're not supposed to be doing what they're doing. Everybody agrees there's bad people in the police. So you and I agree on that.
Absolutely.
What do we do about violent people that are among the protesters? And they're not the protesters. They're the violent people that would do damage. That's what I want to know about. And I'm not saying, like, I would defend to my death everybody's right to protest. I would oppose adamantly police enforcement against peaceful protesters. What do you do about the people that are violent and would do the damage? What do you do about those? How do you sort that out? If you could tell me that, without getting into, as you said, my rhetoric, without getting into your rhetoric about, without taking the conversation somewhere else, what do you do about those people?
We see that throughout history, violent police
pushback. What do we do?
Yes, I'm going to get to that. We see violent police pushback against protests, both violent and peaceful.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about what to do about those people. Can you tell me that?
I was going to get to that. And we see that the measures of violent pushback only tend to cause more violence. The role of the police is not to see their fellow community members, because let's be real, this to serve and protect applies to those people as well, because police members are community members. They are community protective services. And so when you are saying that you have to deploy a toxin that is under international law banned for the use during warfare.
You're not answering my question. You're talking about a whole bunch of other parameters. I'm asking, what do you do about people that are being violent, doing damage to public property, burning things deliberately, and there are groups that show up because there's a protest going on, they show up to do that. What do you do about those? And I don't want to hear about the rest because I agree with you on all of it. Everybody knows any police that would be brutal should be arrested and convicted for anything that you would arrest a normal citizen for. And anybody has a right to protest. We agree on all of that. What do you do about those people that are taking advantage of the circumstances to do what they want to do, which is the extreme? That's the question.
I'm going to be honest, Tim. Arresting rioters is correct because that is a crime. However, it's a large. The thing is that this discourse, the discussion about police brutality and reallocating funds is consistently being hijacked by this. Oh, we have rioters talk, and yes, there are rioters, but the thing is, their presence is being exacerbated, is being overshown. The riots have, for the most part, calmed down within the United States, but as has the coverage of the peaceful protests. And so we see that our daily fix, whether it be through CNN, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, CBC, CTV, they're all calming down. They're talking about the protest. And so when we only focus on the rioters, we forget the reasons they're rioting. We forget the reason that people are in the streets at all during a global pandemic, and that is police brutality.
Well, I agree with you that, I agree about the focus. I agree about the skewed news and I listen to Fox because their guy won, so their news is always happy. That's why I listen to it. None of it's real. It's all nonsense. Everything from CNN is nonsense based on whatever their political bent is. And so there's no way to get to the bottom of any given story from that source, that's for sure. And I don't subscribe to it anyway. I look at what's transpired, and peaceful protesters should be just allowed to protest. I don't know what to do. And then the same as, here's the both ends of it for me. The same as, I know you think that I'm going after these people to avoid looking at what's happening to the protesters and black people, but I'm not. I'm just, the nexus is, there's these people doing bad things, things that they should be charged for or should be arrested for. Then there's a police force that just wants to calm everybody. And then in that police force, the same as a group of these bad people, there's a group of bad cops that want to use that as an opportunity to just blow force right out of the water, like to take advantage of that circumstance, just like you're saying. And then it doesn't get reported properly. I don't know what the answers are. And I'm trying to figure out, because that's such, that to the extent of it is such an American problem, how can we bring it back to, dial it back to the point where it does exist in Canadian, but we're not that far along the down that road yet. So I don't know. I'm just looking for solutions.
One of the things I've been taking courses over the summer, and with my professor, we got into a discussion in class regarding this whole situation. And one of the things he told me was that, well, he told the class rather, was that if you have one police officer who beats a black person on the side of the street because they were going 20 over, and then you have 10 officers who don't report that one officer, you then have 11 bad police officers. And so that is where the system's broken. And we have the system, especially within policing, the society and the way police officers interact with one another. There are multiple cases of this where those who speak out or file complaints against their fellow officers are cast away from their society of police officers because, and this is a whole thing, loose lips sink ships, and that's the general mentality.
They become a rat. But let me tell you where that starts, in my opinion. If you know somebody who has a family member who's an idiot, I'm the black sheep in my family, so I kind of know what that's like. And the thing is, what do? Do you turn your brother into the police? No, you don't. You don't turn a family member in. They're a family, and the reforms shouldn't come within. You can't ask them to do it because the will's not there to do it because because they need each other for whatever the reasons. So the reforms have to come from public involvement with the unions, with the administration. Do you know what I'm saying?
But if you have a system that collectively agrees that even if someone does something that is against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, but you collectively agree that it's okay not to report them to the proper authorities, then that is a system. If you could write the program right now that would fix it, what would it be? What would you do? What would it? It starts with a collective public review in conjunction with local governmental authorities into police violence. It starts with that. It starts on the local level. It also starts with addressing the reasons why we need such large police budgets. The crime has been going down consistently over the past 2 decades. Yet police budgets, there is a 3.7% planned increase in the York Region Police budget for 2021 from 2020. So if crime has been going down, why are police budgets going up? And even if so, we have to address the reasons that crime is happening. This brings me back to the stemming from the Reagan eras of the war on drugs. We are still stuck in a punitive system when we need to be stuck in an aiding system. The best way, a study was done by, I believe it was Brown University, that found that the single best way to combat poverty is to invest in reliable public transit, because that connects you to work, that connects you to school, that connects you to family, to fun, and to healthcare. That is the single best way of affecting poverty. Yet in Durham, only 8.3% of their budget is spent on transit. And in York, only 10% is spent on transit. When you reallocate funds, around the budget, you can address those issues and even lower crime even further and not need such a large police force or such a militarized police force, or one that takes up 16% of your budget.
Okay, well, those are some good measures to look at, and it's a subject. I'm glad we discussed this subject because it's one that's really been it's in everybody's craw right now. Because and we all want to go, well, Canada's not that bad, then I get to get on with my day and not have to worry about it. You know what I mean? That's the first thing you want to say. But so I'm glad we discussed it. So I have one question for you. Do you have anything good to say about the police?
Yes, I have had several good interactions with the police. I remember my great grandmother used to live at a retirement home on Eagle Street in Newmarket, Ontario. And I was about maybe 5 or 6 years old. And at that point, I was obsessed with police. I wanted to be a police officer when I grew up, as most kids go through. And my mom and I are sitting in the parking lot of across the street from the retirement home. And there was a police officer in his car. So my mom tells me to go up and say hi. And so I go up and I knock on the window of the police car, and he rolls his window down. And he is a very kind man. He gives me a little plastic badge to wear, a little sticker. And he talks to me, I can't remember, maybe like 5 minutes or so. But yes, there are good experiences with police officers. But just because there are good experiences doesn't mean those should negate the bad ones.
No, absolutely. I just, you know what, I just like to end on a positive note that way, because there's a ton of work to do. But I have a lot. I know a number of police officers. I know some of them, they're militant over the top. I don't subscribe to it. I sincerely hope they come up with the solutions so that all the guys who are good cops don't have to concern themselves about it. The police don't like the idiots in their own business either. Nobody does. I don't like the idiots in my business. So I guess I want to move on to something else, because you're so much more than a police force opinion. So can we move on then, or did you have anything?
Absolutely.
Are we okay with that? All right, we'll revisit. Go ahead.
It's within Georgina, we have only 2 bus routes. We have the 50 and the 51, and each year the ridership of the 51 continues to be lowered. The frequency rather of the 51 continues to be lowered because of low ridership. We have the Go bus that connects to the Park and Ride at Ravenshoe and Woodbine, just at the mouth of the highway. Right. And we have the 50, which connects us to the all-important Davis and Yonge Newmarket bus terminal. Yet our community, even though we are growing, our town back in 2017, I believe it was, had to do a review of the ward system we had, because we're going to have to redistribute that due to population growth, specifically in Southern Keswick, with the possibility of a 6th ward being added. There were several different options that the town council looked over, and that was included. And so while we have this growing population, with many people moving from southern cities northward, we also have to change as a society. Like, we also have to adapt our town itself. Low transit frequency is leading to a higher reliance on cars, which affects climate change, which is a whole other debate in its own. We need more investments into public health. There was only 8.2% of York Region's budget was invested towards health and social services. And in a town like Georgina, that needs to go up even further. We need to help our youth. We need to provide all demographics the ability for reliable healthcare and not have to go down to South Lake or Markham Stouffville hospitals to get good healthcare. I applaud, and my entire heart goes out to all the workers at the Georgina nurse practitioner-led clinic on High Street. That they were my family's main healthcare providers for many years, and even with their building having been gutted by a fire, they're still doing incredible work out of their temporary place currently at Dalton and High. And so we need to offer our citizens more reliable healthcare, more reliable social services. We need to put more money into stuff like the pools, the libraries, the rock. The Merc is a very controversial issue right now within the town of Georgina, but it is something that I wholeheartedly support. We do need another library for Southern Keswick. We do need more town officers for that area because that is the area where the population is growing. We need a pool badly because the Sutton one is not enough for the growing population. We need these services. And to have a Magna-like center, like the Magna Center that is currently in Newark, Ontario on Mulock, to have a Magna-like center within the reaches of our own town would do us wonders. And
I guess I looked at that. Sorry, I looked at that a little bit, and I reviewed. I divided it up into the different budgets that would include the different facilities that are going to go on at the Merck. And when you look at the amounts that go to those budgets in other municipalities, the budget for the Merck falls within an acceptable level of funding and cost. If you divvy it up to where they spend the money there, they don't have to spend it somewhere else. So then they're getting from that budget. I looked at it from a budget perspective. It wasn't as hairy as it first looked.
Yes, but at the same time, that's the current.
My biggest thing, if anything, is more about what's it going to cost to get it up. Because usually you start a project like that in any municipality, it starts at 30 million, and by the time they're done, it's 90 million, and nobody has to answer for it. So it'll be in that process that'll determine whether we end up in good stead or not. I guess that would be my opinion. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, because that area around the Merck, so southern Woodbine, between Woodbine and Queensway, is going to be developed by DG Group. It's going to become further subdivision. Much of the cost of the Merck will be paid for by developmental costs. And that was highlighted at the 2018 municipal election. And so we also are getting major grants from both the provincial and federal governments because of this project. But at the same time, you bring up the fact that its cost and the budget will be within the parameters of other regions. But why can't that be higher? That is within the current budgets and the current expenditures for those sectors of our budget. But why cannot those be higher if we reallocate funds? It all comes back to that. If we provide opportunities, if we provide opportunities, if we provide work, if we provide the services for all people, including disenfranchised members of our society, crime rate based on necessity, based on mental health, based on poverty will go down exponentially because we are sustaining them, we are providing them with the...
So if all that happens, that's great. But here's the thing, traditionally, historically, the budgets that they start with end up at least minimum 50% cost overrun and overtime. And so there's that aspect of it. And your projections for the things that you're projecting aren't on what's going on or on what's going to go on or what might happen or what likely will happen or what is your opinion about what will happen. But the best gauge, in my opinion, and it's for what my opinion is worth, is what's happened in the past is what's going to happen in the future in terms of the result, the consequences, they will all be the same as they were in the last project. A number of different projects done throughout the region, other municipalities, whatever historically has happened is what's going to happen. So if you're doing costs, like really higher costs in other municipalities based on a bunch of stuff that you're projecting is going to be, I don't know that can sustain itself as far as being a solid rationale.
Well, think about it.
Like I said, a great education.
Considering I know these aren't solid statistics because even the numbers for the Merck myself are not on the top of my head. But you said it starts at 50,000, goes up to 90,000 with no one to explain it. Even if you were to take off 1%, only 1% from the York Regional Police annual budget, you would have more than enough to cover that. Well, you would have more than that extra $40 million that you're claiming that it goes up. And it does. Projects do go over budget frequently. The Ottawa LRT, the most recent transit project, lives in infamy within the local psyche due to going over budget. But at the same time, that doesn't negate the positive effects it does have and will continue to have as the project expands into Orleans, into South Keys, into Canada. All these are all areas of Ottawa, by the way. As those projects expand, it will affect more and more people and really truly improve society. So yes, the projects go over budget, but we do have the money. we do have the funds. It's just a matter of shifting where our priorities lie and shifting our general consensus about what roles these services play within our society.
Okay, so that's something that we can agree on. That there, all I care about is fiscal responsibility. I care deeply about social issues. I don't mean that, but when it comes to, all I care is that a bunch of people don't put a bunch of money in their pockets because nobody's keeping an eye on what's going on, and so they're using obscure rationales for the more money that's being spent, or nobody's paying attention, the budgets go up, the cost overruns happen. So now all of these obscure rationales come in to justify, oh, it's going to be okay anyway. If it wasn't okay when they started, the fact that they've cost overrun doesn't make it okay now. That's just my take on it. This stuff should be dealt with before we start. And the cost overruns, I have a lot of respect for, I'll tell you who's a really good guy budget-wise is, for example, I'll give you an example. In our building department, we've always been we've always been a good building department. They have their budget, so on. But recently, a guy by the name of Rod Larimore took over the building department, and he tends to be a budget person. And so I noticed he trims the fat, looks at what services are worthwhile, which ones aren't, what can we do without, what can we. So he actually sits down like John Kretchen used to do when he took over a portfolio. He's my physical hero, John Kretchen. So and so when Rod comes out with a building permit increase, I know he earned it. He worked it. He worked it out. How much can we do without here? Well, what service? Like, he went down his budget, trimmed the fat. So what he does makes sense. Somebody like that in charge of a project like that, all the rationales that come back will be valid. That's my point, I guess.
And
go ahead.
It's good that we have that responsibility when it comes to our money, because much of the municipal budget and regional budget comes from our tax dollars. Yeah. But again, we have to see where our priorities lie. Do we want our dollars to be spent on punishing people for non-violent drug offenses, much of which came during the past decade, 15, 20 years, when it came to cannabis? Isn't that a bit of a red herring in the sense that, and I say it only in the sense that nobody wants that. So you're saying something everybody's going to agree with. Exactly. It's a useless argument in that respect. It's not a useless argument, because in Canada, we are dealing with many people who are facing low non-violent drug offenses for marijuana possession or cannabis possession or growing. And
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%.
The current government has started the process of pardoning many of these people because it is now legal. I can now, as a 19-year-old person, go onto my front porch and light up a joint because it is now legal. But many people are still either in jail or they still have it on their criminal records that they were an offense of a Class A drug possession. And so
I apologize then because we're in total agreement on that issue for sure. Like they should just automatically go down the list. Anything that was illegal that people got convicted for that's legal now, give them a pardon as long as they sign. Well, they don't have to sign because they received justice as it was at that time. So yeah, they could just pardon people, turn them loose.
And so this is much of, and it's stuff like this which we can agree upon. And I'm glad that you and I can agree upon this. And I'm sure many of your viewers will agree upon it as well. But it's a part of that shifting priorities. And again, it all stems back from a system that penalizes people rather than rehabilitates them. And even on top of that, penalizes minorities more than anybody else.
We're in agreement.